very well. How are you doing on that?
I'm great.
Are you excited?
I am, actually. This is the first time we're going to hear, we think, a lot of substance, right, when it comes to how he plans to govern moving forward.
Oh, I'm very excited.
Yeah?
And, you know, having Sergeant at Arms announcing the President of the United States, and as he walks into that packed, chamber with Democrats, Republicans, how will they react? Now, here's what I'm going to be looking for. Will Sheila Jackson Lee be on the aisle to get that selfie?
Oh,
That's
right.
what I'm looking for.
She's one of the aisle hogs, right?
Yes, she is.
We have another friend with us who's arguably got the better weather, I think, and the better time zone, perhaps, to be watching from. Elsie Granderson is live in Los Angeles, joining our watch party. What's up, Elsie?
Hey there, so sorry I'm not there. I see my space on the couch and I just go, wasn't I just there? Just a little bit more snazzy next to a beautiful woman in a gown.
I don't know who that was.
We did have a nice time covering the Oscars
the
other night. We are a multi-purpose outfit here at ABC
Yes.
News Live.
We can still talk about the Oscars if you want.
We can. There will be
there's still
almost.
opinions.
I would expect almost as much drama tonight as there was at the end of the Oscars ceremony.
Oh, man, let's hope not.
Hopefully not.
let's
Hopefully
hope
fewer
they load up the
surprises
right
because we
speech.
do know what Trump plans to talk about. The talking points have leaked as they traditionally do, and as we mentioned, substance is going to be the theme of the night, we think, and we're going to find out Trump's plan in theory on a lot of the issues that he campaigned on and that he's been talking about and issuing executive orders on in his first 40 days.
Yeah, but there also might be some surprises. Apparently, he intimated today that he might be addressing comprehensive immigration reform, which I'll be looking for the Republican reaction to that. That'll be interesting.
Hey, LZ, my man, weighing in here, what are you most wanting to hear or most paying attention to tonight? We just, a quick note for everyone out there, we're seeing there a live look at the Capitol building, of course, where President Trump will be delivering that first address to a joint session of Congress in the House chamber. That looks beautiful at night. But LZ, give me your take here. What are you looking for tonight?
Well, you know, first of all, I think Amy hit it right on the head. I mean, how he threads the needle in terms of this conversation regarding his immigration policy, especially when you consider the fact that he's got to keep his base happy in regards to the wall, but then also he's mentioned how difficult this is for him in terms of dealing with the dreamers and the children who were brought here when they were very young and have grown up here, and what exactly does he plan on doing with that? How does he message this so that his base doesn't feel as if they've been betrayed, but that he does open the door so that the members of Congress can begin doing something that's a little bit more compassionate? That's number one. And then number two, for me, I'm really curious as to how he's going to talk about the budget, particularly as he talks about increased spending with the military, and what exactly are the cuts going to be to help balance that increase in spending. He mentioned foreign aid. Well, we know about $50 billion the U.S. gives in foreign aid. A significant chunk of that is for military. Obviously, that's a tactical sort of donation, if you will, to these countries. So does he cut into that? How exactly does he pay for this increase in the military? One of the two things that I'm most interested in from tonight's speech.
Yeah, Amy, it's a good point LZ brings up, though. How does he walk that fine line? Because he's clearly he has to kind of make good on his campaign promises, right? Mm-hmm. But he is coming at these issues a little bit differently than traditional conservative orthodoxy, right?
Right. Certainly he is. And
that was a fair statement.
Yes. And he has said that this budget is a national security budget, and that was one of his campaign promises, was to beef up the military and, send help to our men and women in the field. Another issue that I think will be very interesting to hear tonight is how he addresses Obamacare, repeal and replace. And there is some reporting that he may not be discussing repeal and replace. And maybe it's because of some of the polling. And I can tell you, Rasmussen reports, we have found that support for repeal and replace among likely voters has been declining. It was at 40% in November. It's only at 30% now among likely voters. And now we see that over half of likely voters, they want to see Obamacare addressed piece by piece. They want to see a more modest reform approach, which again is very much contrary to the Republican position on this.
It's an incredible turnaround. Hey, for more on this, let's go down to Washington, D.C. right now. Our colleague Cecilia Vega, our senior White House correspondent, joins us live from D.C. Hey, Cecilia, how are you doing tonight?
Hey guys, ready for a big night?
Ready.
Absolutely.
Ready as we'll ever be. Give me a sense of what you are, what you're going to be watching tonight, what you think some of the headlines might be coming out of tonight's remarks.
Well, I can tell you this, that as of just a few hours ago, in fact, sources in the White House were telling us that the president is still tweaking this speech. So exactly what is in it, we still don't know. He was practicing today. He's been holding listening sessions. We get the sense that this is something he is excited and ready to do. I'm sure you guys have been talking about this. Is a very first for President Trump, not just his first, obviously, joint address, but this is the first big stage that he's been on, his first big political stage since his inauguration, and there's a lot of pressure to deliver. I will be looking to see who he exactly is speaking to today. Who is his audience? Is he delivering this address tonight to viewers at home, to the base that got him there? Is he delivering it to any of the Hillary Clinton supporters or people who didn't vote for him? Or is he, as he needs to do, to really be successful tonight, speaking also to the Republicans in the room, that if he wants to get down to the business of governing, he's got to reach out to them and win them over tonight, specifically when it comes to health care, tax reform, and budget. He's got work to do, and the deadline and the timeline is ticking fast.
Cecilia, in an interview with Fox News, President Trump said that he would give his messaging a grade in the C range. Tonight is a great opportunity for him to improve upon that grade in his messaging. What do you expect he will do in terms of substance within his speech to spread the Trump administration message in a better way?
This is definitely one of the things. I've got this short little list here of things that I've made a note to watch out for tonight, and messaging is a huge one. Look, it's not unusual that a president this early on, or any president for that matter, would basically blame communications, that the messaging has gone wrong when something has not gone right. And we have seen a lot of misses in this White House over the last 5 weeks. But I think in order to get back on track, to try to rein this in, we're going to see President Trump really hitting on his highlights reel, what he would consider the successes of these first few weeks in office. So what are those? That's trade, pulling out of TPP. That is his Supreme Court pick, Gorsuch. And really, I think he would put immigration in that camp also. He will be talking about that travel ban executive order, the rollout, albeit flawed. I think all can agree the core of that is partly what got him elected. His supporters are very supportive of this measure, and of course, the border wall. He's got moves in place to see this underway. So those are the big successes that I think he'll be talking about. But this is not the one thing we all know, having covered him for this long now, is you can't believe anything is going to happen in a Trump administration until it actually happens. So I will be watching to see if he sticks to message, if he sticks to that teleprompter that's in front of him, or does he go off script and go rogue, and then all bets are off, guys, if that happens.
Cecilia, speaking of the script, we know that Stephen Miller reportedly was the person who authored the speech that Trump is supposed to be delivering. The last time we heard of Stephen Miller's name was about 2 Sundays ago. Pretty much didn't go too well for him. What are we expecting from Stephen Miller in terms of being the author of Trump's first major address?
Wait, LZ, are you saying that you don't believe the president when he said he was proud of Stephen Miller in this tweet after that interview?
Well, when you're being panned on both sides of the aisle.
I do think the president is, and perhaps Stephen Miller himself, are the only two people who actually thought that interview on This Week actually went very well. Look, you don't even have to say reportedly. We know from our own reporting at ABC that Stephen Miller, this young conservative, very powerful voice in the West Wing, is indeed one of the writers. We're told that he did work, he had a big hand in this speech, but that the president has been tweaking it himself. This is a team of writers and a group of other people who also helped him on his inaugural address. So let's just talk about that inaugural address really quickly, right? The White House billed that as being very much as they're billing the speech that we're about to hear here in Washington tonight, that it was going to be optimistic and uplifting and unifying, all the things that they say that we will hear tonight. And as we all remember, sort of that speech ended and a lot of people went, wait, what was that? You're talking about carnage in America. It was, I think, far from the uplifting message that the White House said that they would deliver. So uplifting to them perhaps is not uplifting to everyone else. Stephen Miller has a definite, strong viewpoint on a lot of very controversial hot button issues. I think we will certainly see national security come up tonight in the vein of Stephen Miller's thinking, perhaps, and when it comes to immigration as well. But you know what? I hear myself saying immigration out loud, and the president and the White House really threw us for a curve today on this potential for comprehensive immigration reform. None of us really know that this language that is being floated around late this afternoon will come up in this speech. I mean, we do know that he's going to talk immigration reform. We do know that in that audience there will be family members of people who have been killed by undocumented immigrants. He is going into this speech, we've been told, ready to talk about immigration. How that looks, guys, we got 50 minutes, and I guess we'll find out.
Right, and LZ, I'd like to jump in a little bit in terms of, you know, the process of putting a speech like this together. I used to write State of the Senate speeches for Bill Frist when he was Majority Leader. He delivered them on the Senate floor the day after the State of the Union. And I can tell you, it is a group endeavor. You work with senior policy officials who are, you know, wanting to get their points in. Of course, you're working with the principal, the senator, and also working with other legislators. We would, you know, get some feedback from the White House even of how you're going to move forward. So I think we can sort of overplay this idea of Stephen Miller, the writer puppeteer behind this. That's not really how these things are put together. And I'm very sympathetic because it's hard to do a kitchen sink speech that holds together thematically. Typically, they're not, you know, jewels of literature.
Amy, with all due respect, I think we know that if that's a very traditional way in which speeches have been written, what you're experiencing. This is a very non-traditional, untraditional sort of administration. So perhaps in the past, or what you're familiar with, is this big group effort.
But Elsie, we know...
I'm not quite sure if we're going to see this group effort with the Trump administration.
Right, but we know, for example, when President Trump gave a foreign policy speech, that was written by someone else, and he stayed on prompter.
Okay, well, this is a spirited discussion. We're going to thank Cecilia Vega down in D.C., and we're going to stay in D.C. with Kristen Soltis Anderson, who has more on what to expect from this Trump speech. Kristen, thank you for joining us. What do you got?
Thank you for having me. Well, I'm looking forward to this speech because I think that it's an opportunity for Donald Trump to lay out in a little more detail than he did in his inaugural address what exactly he wants to achieve from a policy perspective. I think the folks in that room are a really big audience for him because you've got, on the one hand, congressional Democrats that absolutely loathe him, that really don't, in I think many cases, think there's a lot they can do to work with him, that think this first month has not involved any overtures to them. On the other hand, you have congressional Republicans, some of whom love Trump, but others who are pretty nervous. They're going home for town halls, there's lots of people coming and yelling at them about things, and they're looking for the president to kind of calm them down and say, this is going to be okay. So I expect Donald Trump to try to do a victory lap, as Cecilia said, on a couple of things where he'll claim that he's got victories that he can say he's banked. He's nominated someone for the Supreme Court, et cetera, et cetera. He loves to talk about how he is a winner. So anything where he can claim that he's already scored a win, whether it's lowering the price of fighter jets and things like that, I bet you that winds up in the speech. I think my question is, what happens if something in that room throws him off prompter? So I doubt that he will go off prompter randomly. But this is a time where he is not just speaking to a friendly audience. He's not just talking to a rally of his supporters or the people who showed up at his inauguration. There are going to be congressional Democrats in that room that really don't like him. They've brought guests there primarily to make him uncomfortable on topics that really kind of drive a wedge between him and the American people on issues. So what happens if somebody screams out, "You lie," like what happened with, I think it was Congressman Walsh back when Obama was president, screamed out at the president, "You lie," and it became this controversial moment. Does a congressional Democrat do that? Does someone heckle Donald Trump? Do people stand up and turn their backs as they're booing? And does that knock him off prompter? That's something that I'm looking for.
Sure to be a lot of drama, or potential drama, in the House chamber there. But Kristen, I want to get your take on one specific issue that we're supposed to be hearing about tonight. That is the plan for the Affordable Care Act moving forward. Because as you mentioned, all the Congress folks in there, you know, it's not just the Democrats that want some answers about what's going to happen, whether repeal and replace will move forward. The congressional Republicans who've been the ones who've been standing out in front of those town halls, getting shouted down and getting a lot of heated questions from their constituents, they need some answers too. So as Amy mentioned, you know, the winds have shifted a bit, right? There's a really high approval rating for the ACA right now. How does he handle this? Where does he go on this?
Well, I think on some of these issues, he is still going to be looking to Congress to fill in the details. He's never been a policy details guy and hasn't really suggested that this is going to be a policy details White House. That he, as president, would probably be more than happy to sign a bill sent his way up Pennsylvania Avenue from the Hill, accomplishing things like tax reform, accomplishing things like repealing and replacing or repairing the Affordable Care Act. But I don't know how detailed he's going to get in terms of what he wants repeal and replace to look like. And I think he's very sensitive to the idea that there are many of his voters in, states that went from red to blue, states that had expanded Medicaid, places like Ohio, where if repeal of Obamacare means repeal of Medicaid expansion, a lot of his voters might wind up losing their health care if the replacement plan doesn't have some kind of stopgap or fix to address that. So I suspect that he will want to make the case that he's somebody who wants to sign a good repeal and replace bill. It's going to be fantastic, it's going to be great, but I doubt that he will get into very many details himself, because I think it's still his intention to punt a lot of this stuff down to the Hill, let them make the tough decisions, let them take the heat.
All right, Kristen Soltis Anderson, keeping an eye on it down in D.C. for us. Thanks so much, Kristen. Good to talk to you.
Thank you.
Also keeping an eye on what President Trump has to say tonight, a bunch of folks out in Brooklyn. Charlie James, our own Charlie James, is out there with some folks who are, I believe, protesting. It's already a bit of a noisy affair there. But Charlie, tell us who these folks are and what their message is tonight.
Hey, so that ruckus that you're hearing, that is the sounds of the casserole lasso going on here. If you're not familiar, that in Spanish literally means casserole, but it's a popular form of protest in Latin American countries that involves banging on pots and pans with utensils. You can see a lot of that going on here tonight down at Brooklyn Borough Hall. This was set up by the Working Families Party, and the Casserole Lasso is a little bit of a nod to the immigrant communities here in New York City that they say have been victimized by this administration. They have been calling this the People's Address tonight. Earlier today, we heard representatives from the Working Families Party and United We Dream give what they're calling the People's Address, an alternative address to President Trump's speech tonight, and focusing a lot on immigration issues here.
Well, I'm seeing a lot of
noise.
Hi, this is Amy. I'm seeing a lot of resist Trump signs, and of course they're protesting the president. But have you talked with anyone who might be willing to give him the benefit of the doubt, find places where they would be able to work with President Trump or support him if they hear things tonight that they like?
Yeah, so the resist Trump hashtag and sign you're seeing a lot. That's actually because the Working Families Party has been holding Resist Trump Tuesdays every Tuesday since January all across the city. So this is now a weekly protest, Resist Trump protest that they've been holding, and they say that the numbers have just kept growing every week. I talked to a couple of people here tonight about President Trump's recent comments on immigration, saying that he's more open to immigration reform that includes a pathway to legal status. Also, his comments about DACA recipients and that they have nothing to worry about. And they said that they really believe it's false hope, that they are not holding their breath, that he is actually going to do anything good for their community. So I did ask a couple people point blank, like, what do you want to hear? What could he say that would make you feel better about what's going on? And they said, honestly, they don't expect anything from him tonight that they're going to be happy with.
Charlie, thank you so much. We'll check back in with you later. Now we're going to go from Trump protesters to Wichita, Kansas, and Trump voters. Matt Gutman is there. Matt, how you doing?
People are, but who's conservative again? Ah, wow. Hey, folks. Hey, Amna. So we are here in fantastic Wichita State University. We're at the Go Create Labs, where over there all sorts of amazing machinery is held. This is a 3D printing lab, and we got together about 20 folks here from this town to talk about what they expect from the president tonight. Now, the reason we chose Wichita is because it's basically smack dab in the middle of the country. It's about 1,200 miles from New York, 1,300 miles from Los Angeles. This is flyover country, but what we've got here is a pretty diverse array of views here. Some people who voted for Trump, lots of folks who consider themselves progressives, and a lot of folks who consider themselves conservatives. And just sort of scanning over the room, and there are a bunch of messages that we heard tonight. People care about immigration. They want to hear about this EO that is coming out tomorrow, health care, but a lot about tone. A lot of folks want to hear what is going to be different from the president. I assume, from what I heard, you want him to sound more presidential, to stop with paying too much attention to his detractors and his critics, and to get down to work and to business. Braden here was talking about, he was at CPAC just last week, and he saw a lot of victory laps, but 40 days in, he wants folks to get back to work. Marty over here talked about immigration, and he wants to hear more about that. Who was talking about tone? Jennifer, tell me more about what you expect and hope to hear specifically about the president's tone tonight.
Several of us have indicated that we'd like to hear a more informed tone as well as a more collaborative tone. It gets back to the get down to work message. How are we going to work together with Congress to get things done for the country?
Right. I want to introduce you to Johnny, who is a longtime conservative Republican. He said he was born Republican. It's really interesting. Dyed on the wool. He does a lot of work here. You're a developer. You've been in the oil fields. What do you hope to hear from the president tonight?
I'd like to hear more specifics on the agenda. I'd like to hear specifics on immigration, but less criticizing his critics. I'd like to see him silence his critics with deeds.
So Johnny and I had a conversation earlier about Twitter. Johnny is a huge fan of Twitter.
No, I don't even know how to get on, but I do use email.
He does use email. So Johnny does a lot of business, and one of the things he refuses to do is business via email. You want more face-to-face interaction. And that is kind of the tone that we picked up here in Wichita today. We had a panel earlier in which we spoke to a bunch of folks as well. And what they were able to do is bridge the gap between a lot of, well, the very wide gap between their political views by talking to each other face to face, and not through email, not through social media, and it was incredibly civil, and we hope to get that from this crowd here today. Now, who here was talking about terrorism? I think that was you, Ben. Anybody else concerned about terrorism here? Terrorism. Jobs are important here in Wichita. This place has seen an uptick in economic activity over the past couple of years, specifically since 2014. So things are starting to look up. So that's one of the things they want to hear, more about jobs and how the modern economy will be created.
I have a question for the crowd there. What kind of tone or attitude do they want to see from Democrats in the chamber tonight? We were just talking with Kristen. There might be a congressman who yells something to try to get under Donald Trump's skin, or you might see people turning their backs or sitting on their hands, frowny faces. What does the group think about how Democrats should be responding to the commander-in-chief?
Okay, so I'm now back in the studios asking how folks would like to hear the president respond, or how Democrats would respond to this address. What do you want? How do you want them to respond? What if there's an outburst like, I guess it was in 2009 when Joe Wilson stood up and said, "You lie"? What are you guys thinking about that? A lot of nods here.
I mean, no matter what, he is the president of the United States, but I do want the Democrats to stand strong. I want them to believe in what the Democrat policies have been and not to start falling apart. I mean, we need to be able to stand strong and stand for the people, and all people, not just the selective few. And I think that's the message that Trump has been given, and the Democrats need to be back on, to be the all-inclusive and bringing everyone together. We need to start working together all the time.
This is a red state. Out of 105 counties, 103 voted for President Trump. But there are some Democrats in this room right now. Yeah, they're nodding. But the major tone from what I've been hearing from town halls is resist, resist, resist. Is that something that you guys want to see? No.
So I'm part of the resistance, having been to a couple
You're part of the resistance.
Protests here, doing my physics homework with all of those resistors. But what I want to see is Democrats standing firm to what they want to fight for the protection of people, but not standing so firm on party values that they forget that they're supposed to be doing something to help the American people. I want them to remember that if we agree on economic reform or if we agree on tax reform, that's not something to protest just because the other party proposed it.
Okay.
Wow, physics gives you a lot of maturity.
Again, and that's kind of the message. Yeah, well, this is a smart group. We're at a university. These folks are, I don't think we just get any old panel together, right? I mean, we get the best panel together. And we really appreciate these folks being here. I know we got to throw it back to you in the studio, but that is sort of the tone that we've been hearing here. A tone of moderation here in the middle of the country, in the heartland and flyover country, which is really actually the center of the country and so important. But moderation, bridging the gaps, and being able to talk to each other more civilly. That is really the sort of the encapsulation of what the folks here want.
There's a lot there to grab onto. Matt Gutman live from Wichita, Kansas. Thank you so much, Matt. And guys, Matt has been reporting from Wichita for a few days now. You can go to abcnews.com and see more of his reporting and some other things the voters there have to say, if you like. Let's head back down to Washington, D.C., where all the action is tonight. Alex Castellanos joins us live from our Washington, D.C. bureau. Alex, thanks so much for being with us.
Oh, great being with you.
So listen, I got to ask you, we spoke back on Election Day. You were there on the couch with us as Mr. Trump made history and won the election that night. Back then you said he could be the turnaround CEO that this country needs. So give me your take on the first 40 days. How's he doing?
Well, I think the good news for Republicans is that we elected an outsider to change Washington. The bad news for Republicans is we elected an outsider who's very unfamiliar with Washington. And we've seen a bumpy first few weeks. But I think one of the things that's happening now, this last week seems to have calmed down a little bit. And I think tonight you're going to see that long-awaited pivot that we've kind of all been waiting for and we've never seen. But not a pivot on issues. We're going to see Donald Trump become more presidential tonight, more inclusive and generous and optimistic. I think you're still going to see darkness, but you're going to see some light. You're going to see problems and solutions and a larger vision for the country. I think the country's hungry for that right now. And Donald Trump's a pretty good salesman. I think he sees what the country's looking for.
Alex, I just got to say real quick, I know LZ has a question from LA, but just to follow up on that, we have heard about this pivot before. During the campaign a few times, right before he took office. Like, what makes you think today is different?
I could be licking the cold frozen metal bar one more time here. I could be wrong. But I think Trump understands what the country is looking for. And right now, to get an agenda through Congress, he needs to bring some folks together to do that. And there are two strategies in politics to kind of win victories. One is direct opposition, polarize, the fighters go to their respective corners. Another strategy, hug your adversary. Go across the 50-yard line, play on their side of the field, and kind of attack from there. I think you're going to see Donald Trump be more presidential, generous, optimistic, and say, look, we don't have to settle for the way things are working now in Washington. We can all do better. It puts Democrats on the defensive. It's good politics.
Alex, LZ here. You talked about embracing your adversary. Hey there, sir. You talked about embracing your adversaries as one strategy. Some of those adversarial voices happen to be coming from his own party still. A lot of that has to do with the fact that there's so many reports about the connections to Russia, particularly during the campaign season. So my question to you is, what can he say tonight to begin to win the trust of not just the Democrats who obviously didn't vote for him, but also from his own party who have questions about what he knew, when he knew, and whether or not he was involved with Russia's influence in our election?
Well, I think we're going to have slightly different views on the Russian problem because as far as I understand it, there are a lot of allegations and questions, smart political questions from Democrats and from the New York Times, most of which have been debunked. And there isn't any fire there, just some Democrat-generated smoke. But the Republican Party is actually holding together pretty well. Trump's numbers among Republicans are as good as they've ever been. folks in Congress see that, so there's a red wall in the House and Senate, and the Republican wall is holding together. Republicans also know that if they crack, if they fracture, that's their last chance to get anything done. The first few years of a presidential administration. So they're going to hold this together as long as they can and stick with Donald Trump. And I think that's an important thing to understand here. Donald Trump is not so much with Republicans as his problem. It's really reaching across the middle to build a governing consensus. Now, Trump has one advantage here that's not necessarily good for Republicans. Donald Trump doesn't have to build a classic Republican coalition that starts with conservatives and goes to the middle. Donald Trump could start with the middle and go and play with Democrats and build a consensus there. He's very non-ideological in a lot of these things. And what does that do? That puts pressure on Republicans to work with him now and to stay together, or else he'll go play with the other team.
Alex, I got to just push back just real quick, because it seems as if you had a former president already come out with being critical of Donald Trump. Obviously with Senator McCain, Lindsey Graham. In my own reporting, I've spoken to many congressmen, Republican congressmen, off the record who have their doubts because of Russia. So I understand how maybe when you come to the polling of voters they have the support, but I'm speaking of congressional leadership who are questioning whether or not Donald Trump was involved with any sort of shenanigans with Russia.
Well, they may be questioning it, but as far as having anything to actually investigate, until the FBI comes up with something, what happened? If the New York Times had put out these stories, let's say the Russians told the Trump campaign or somebody about Hillary Clinton's emails. Well, if the New York Times had done its job, we would have learned the same thing from her. This was from them. This is a Hillary Clinton problem, not there's nothing illegal if the Russians had told the Trump campaign about Hillary Clinton or about the campaign. There's nothing illegal about the campaign having asked. So there doesn't seem to be, that's just the law. And if you would prefer that, Hillary Clinton's issues and some of her scandals had remained hidden, I can certainly understand that. But that doesn't mean there was anything wrong there. It's a good political opportunity for the Democrats to try to fog up and cloud up the opening weeks of a new Republican administration. But I do have to say, I don't think I remember seeing an opposing party be as kind of graceless as the Democrats are now in trying to cause this new administration to stumble and to organize against an incoming president as kind of politically and negative.
Were you in a coma during 2009? Were you in a coma in 2009 when Mitch McConnell said it was a one-term?
I
was drinking a little bit.
We're going to keep this conversation civil. Alex Castellanos, thank you. In DC, thank you for your views, and thank you, LZ. And just for those of you watching, these senior Trump team members like Kellyanne Conway, Sean Spicer, Ivanka, and Jared Kushner have been emerging from the White House, so we should expect, there's Melania and the president right now actually emerging from the White House with a very serious expression on his face as he heads to his most important address since his inauguration 40 days ago. That's Donald Trump. For more perspective and words of wisdom on what we're about to see, we go across the pond to our very own Terry Moran. Terry, what's the view like from overseas?
Good luck with the words of wisdom, but I'll give you a sense. First of all, let me just say that Donald Trump is almost as much a figure of fascination, of fun, of concern, of all the turbulence and turmoil around him that he stirs. His entertainment is almost as intense over here as it is in the United States. He bestrides the world stage right now to an incredible extent. In fact, in Russia, in Vladimir Putin's Russia, where he has been liked, but now they're kind of changing their mind on him, he is the most discussed celebrity in Russia, measured by mentions in the Russian press. He beat Vladimir Putin, 220,000 mentions in the month of January to Putin's 147,000. No, well, that's the first time that's happened in about 6 years. So people over here are fascinated by him. Well, the other thing is they can't make heads or tails of him, or whatever the equivalent is here, because look, they just heard Vice President Mike Pence over on this side of the pond, as they say, Secretary of State Rex Tillerson, Secretary of Defense James Mattis, all over here, and Nikki Haley at the UN, all say stuff like Trump believes in NATO, Trump believes in Europe, Trump believes in a two-state solution in the Middle East. And as one person in the British government put it to me, he said, well, why should we believe them? We know that there's more influence that Twitter is more important in this administration than the State Department. And I think there is a sense here that they can't figure out how this government is working or really what it intends. For example, in Russia, right, they thought they had their new best buddy, and all of a sudden Trump is talking about boosting America's nuclear capability, withdrawing from the New START treaty, the limiting nuclear weapons. In the Middle East, he's been turning heads, turning people upside down. They can't follow him. They don't know who's running the show, but they sure are fascinating.
Terry, this is Amy Holtz here. I have a question. Over there across the pond, do you see the same sort of divide between elite media opinion and sort of the people and the populist opinion? Of course, we just had the example of Brexit, where the smart people were Remainers and they were against it, but you saw a lot of working class people, of course, who voted for it, and Brexit prevailed. Do you see a similar dichotomy when it comes to opinions about Donald Trump?
Well, sure. Look, I think one of the things that we now understand Donald Trump and Steve Bannon and his team in this campaign did, they sensed a political moment was happening. People were fed up and tired and exhausted with this tired old politics that had been happening that seemed to run their lives into a dead end. And certainly a lot of that was anti-establishment. Now, in Britain, I should say, Brexit was invented by three guys who went to Eton together, went to the same elite high school, right? David Cameron, Boris Johnson, Michael Gove. They cooked up this thing because they were competing for power in their own party. The British people were not clamoring for the equivalent of a constitutional amendment to get them out of Europe. It was a power play within the Conservative Party, dominated by the most elitist people you can possibly imagine. So the notion that they were tribunes of the working people who put Brexit to the voters is probably not true. That said, there's a Trumpian moment happening, not just in Britain, but right across Europe, for that very reason, the sense that that the old way of looking at the world and arranging politics has been corrupted by elites of all ideological stripes who are just getting all the goodies, it seems. The game seems rigged and the rest of it. Now, the alternative media, look, I think we also now know that the old disinformation and subversion campaign that used to come out of Moscow comes now out of Moscow again into all these European countries. There's a huge concern in the Netherlands, which has an election coming up, France, which has an election coming up, Germany, which has an election coming up, that Russian bots on their social media and fake accounts and fake news and hoaxes and what they used to call disinformation, that is poisoning the political well, the democratic well. So they're having a Trumpian moment, but as far as the media is concerned, I think there is some concern about who to believe simply because so much of it has been subverted.
Terry Moran live for us in London. Terry, thank you so much for making the time. Always good to chat with you.
You bet.
And we just saw a live picture right there of Vice President Pence and members of the congressional leadership making their way into the House chamber. Let's go live now to our colleague Rick Klein, ABC's political director, who's keeping an eye on all this from our Washington, D.C. bureau. Hey, Rick, how's it going?
It is a surreal night. I feel like we won't actually be able to fully comprehend what we know is about to happen until we actually see it. That moment when you hear Mr. Speaker, the President of the United States, and there is Donald Trump in this most unlikely of moments here before Congress.
Well, we're just about 20 minutes away now from what will be the biggest speech President Trump delivers since taking office. Rick, I just want to point out one thing, though. We see members of the congressional leadership coming in now, shaking hands across the aisle. There's a lot of sort of bipartisan camaraderie there. These guys are all colleagues, of course, even if they are on different sides of the political aisle. Unity has been the word we're hearing again and again in terms of what we might hear from President Trump tonight. We haven't quite seen it yet, so I'm wondering how you think he addresses that tonight.
It's a new tone for a new phase of his presidency. I think that's the best spin to put on it. The flip side is that this is a man who, as president, has continued to use his Twitter feed to insult people, who's now calling for unity. A businessman that's been a deal maker in the past, maybe returning to those roots. and someone who's such a political shapeshifter that it may be gone by morning. But I think to take him at his word and to say, look, he wants to become a president now, 5 weeks, 6 weeks in, someone who could do some actual work of governing, it's worth remembering that just about everything he's done so far has been unilateral. He's been working on his own, he's been doing executive orders, and he's created quite a little chaotic atmosphere around him. He needs the 535 members of Congress on board for him now. And tapping back into those roots of support, that's why I think we're about to see a different tone from the president. Whether you trust it, whether it'll last, all those are secondary questions for him to use this platform to try to talk about healing divides rather than worsening them.
Rick Klein, Amy Holmes here. I spotted Sheila Jackson Lee on the aisle. I take that as a positive sign. But she might give him a little bit of a lecture, the president, as he walks in. But to that point, we've been talking a lot about President Trump's comportment. What about Democratic comportment? What do you expect to see from Democrats tonight? Do you think you're going to see this resist Trump, which they're getting a lot of course from their base, that the base wants the Democratic Party to resist everything Trump does? Or do you think they'll give him applause for things that they think, I could work with him on that, like, for example, infrastructure, or if tonight he happens to discuss comprehensive immigration reform?
The word from Democratic leadership is that Democrats plan to be on their best behavior. You see a good number of white pantsuits out there and white outfits, particularly from women on the Democratic side. That is meant as a silent protest. That was a color used by the suffragette movement of the last century. I think, though, that if he says things that get Democrats excited, particularly if they can poke Republicans over it, they won't hesitate to start applauding over it. By and large, though, this is not a Democratic conference in the House or the Senate that's inclined to work with the president. They haven't seen much upside in that yet. It's going to take a lot more than one speech or a couple of casual mentions of immigration or infrastructure to get them to change that attitude. So it's one thing to watch today to see, are they civil? Is there a kind of you lie Joe Wilson moment? Do they look for a confrontation, look for a moment with President Trump? Mm-hmm. I think people have been talking about that around the edges, but I think for the most part, they are going to comport themselves with some dignity and know that there are plenty of legislative battles ahead.
Hey, Rick, LZ here. We're spending a lot of time talking about the Democrats. This weekend, they elect Tom Perez to leave the party. They're having a 72-year-old white male give the rebuttal. Does it seem as if to you, because from my perspective, it looks as if the Democrats still haven't quite gotten the full message yet, that they need to move away from the establishment? What are your thoughts on this?
Well, I think the choice of Governor Beshear, the former governor of Kentucky, suggests to me, LZ, that they didn't know who else to go to. They couldn't decide, do you want to go with someone from the progressive wing? Do you want to go with something from the establishment wing? Do you want to go with an up-and-comer? Who do you choose? So they went with an elder statesman instead. It suggests that they are going to confront President Trump based on policy and not on personality. Frankly, I kind of think that's enough right now. I think they're going to be plenty united in just opposing Donald Trump, unless he shifts gears in a really substantial way. And I think that fight that you referenced, how far you are from the establishment, they'll get there. I think the fight for DNC chair, look, there were two people who were to the left of the political spectrum. It really wasn't a century squishy moderate against a Bernie Sanders type. These were two committed liberals who are now working together. I feel like they're going to punt on that piece of it, and I don't think they've figured it out, but I also feel like they kind of don't need to, as long as they have Donald Trump uniting them.
Rick, I have a packet full of leaked talking points here from what we're expecting from Trump's speech. But as we saw the president get into his car in the motorcade, he turned on the light in the car and was reading, visibly reading and making notes on his speech next to the First Lady Melania Trump. So my question is, what can we actually expect once he starts speaking? Is it going to be his speech or is it going to be his thoughts?
I think mostly speech, but it wouldn't be a Trump speech if he didn't go off script a little bit. People will be looking for kind of the touchstones of a Trump speech. Will he mention his Electoral College victory? Will he go back to any of the campaign chants? Keep in mind, he has not, as President of the United States, faced a crowd that is even the least bit hostile to him. They have been handpicked audiences. His inaugural was sort of self-selected for people that are supportive of him. He even did a campaign event a week and a half ago down in Florida. This is half the room in there are Democrats. And then with the remaining half, probably 80-90% of them were not with Donald Trump until they needed to be with Donald Trump. So this is, by all intents and purposes, a hostile crowd, to say nothing of the various guests brought in by Democrats. he feeds off of crowds. So one thing I'm watching tonight, guys, is how does he react to the possibility that some of his lines are going to go over like duds? And you're not going to have rousing applause and people on their feet cheering and clapping. The Trump team is preparing for quite a bit of applause tonight. What if they don't get it? What if he doesn't get that kind of energy back from the crowd? Is that the moment that he goes off script?
Well, Rick, we know that he's not a poker player, so we're going to see it in his facial expressions if he's disappointed or unhappy. But I also want to talk about the optics of the room because, as we all know, during the President Obama, his 2 terms, the Democratic Party was very hollowed out. They've lost 63 House members, 10 senators. So do you think the optics of the chamber are going to look like this is a pretty Republican-looking chamber?
It depends on the message because, frankly, you don't get a sense of what the partisan makeup is like until or unless there are applause lines.
Right.
And there's going to be lots of red meat out there. And the White House knows that without the base, you don't get anything done. If you don't have Republicans united, you are not going to have a legislative agenda to speak of, which is one of the things that's surprising about them leading with the idea of comprehensive immigration reform, with the president's comments today with network news anchors earlier in the day. If that is a takeaway, you're going to have lots of times where there's Republicans sitting on their hands. But I think that image that you referenced, Amy, is a critical one for President Trump. He needs to get back to the basics here because it's been such a wild ride of the first 5 or 6 weeks, and he knows there's only so much he can do by himself. He needs buy-in from the people in that room. The fact is that starts with his base.
Hey, Rick, it's Amna. We just saw there House Speaker Paul Ryan called the joint session into order there. And we should point out this is not a State of the Union. I know a lot of people are calling it a State of the Union. It's just his first address to a joint session. I got to get your take on one specific issue that's been coming up a lot. It was hinted at a little bit earlier today in the headlines. How President Trump addresses this definitive and very worrying trend of anti-Semitic attacks in the last few weeks. There was an incredible number. In January alone, 48 Jewish community centers in 26 states experienced some kind of threat or act of vandalism. Folks were not happy with the way that President Trump and his team responded, either the timeliness of it and the tone in which they responded. Do you think he's going to address something that specific tonight?
I think he has to. I think the pressure is enormous on him to do so, in part because he's been given a few opportunities earlier in just this month, the last couple of weeks, that he whiffed on, frankly. He didn't address directly. He has come around and tried to patch that up. And I think it's important to be clear here. These threats at Jewish community centers, they're not just threats that are anti-Semitic in nature. During the day at a Jewish community center anywhere in the United States, those are schools, those are daycares. These are small children that are being forced to evacuate. The fear that is striking in the heart of that community, it's more than vandalism and it's more than a couple of slurs. This is a real issue that's an urgent one. And I think for most presidents, it kind of wouldn't be a big deal. Donald Trump's made it a bigger deal because of his refusal in the past to condemn anti-Semitic, racist, misogynistic, xenophobic comments that are made by people who have supported him. And he's tried to stay away from it. But I think one thing you're likely to see tonight, maybe part of this new tone, is a more forceful condemnation. And to hear it directly from the president, I think is an important point because you're right. This is real. It is going on. You can't blame it on Trump supporters, but there's an undeniable overlap there. And I think more pressure than ever on the president of the United States, just as president, forget the politics of this, to say once and for all on this big stage, this is not acceptable in America.
Rick, do you have a sense of why it took the White House so long to respond to the hate crime shooting or the alleged hate crime shooting in Kansas? And I've noticed it's been reported that Mr. Trump still hasn't publicly responded to that tragedy either.
Yeah, my sense is that it didn't fit with a storyline that the White House was interested in telling because they have shown a propensity to jump on news items even without complete information when it does fit a storyline that they're interested in telling. They've come around on it, and I think I would kind of put it in the same league as the anti-Semitic threats that are being made and the vandalism that's being made is on the level of you have to get on board for this. Because you're right, Elsie, it's the sort of thing that you would expect this president, who's as attuned to the news cycle as any that we've ever had, to weigh in on. And I think there's a tendency in this White House to protect people who are viewed as supportive of this White House. And when the president is asked about anti-Semitic comments by people that might be supportive of him, his response a couple of times was, look by the kind of margin I won with. This is love. This is not hate. And I think that's a telling comment. And I think they've been slow off the blocks to recognize some of the dirtier underbelly of American society that the Trump era has revealed in recent weeks.
We're just 10 minutes away now from President Trump stepping up there to deliver these crucial remarks. Back here in New York, Amy, I'd love to get your take on all this. Do you think it's fair criticism that Mr. Trump and his team have been facing on some of these fronts we've been talking about?
I think certainly when it comes to messaging, if the American people don't feel confident in the president's response to these attacks on the Jewish community, then the president himself said he gives himself a C in some of his messaging. I know that
C or C plus, I think.
C or C plus, something like that.
He's in the C range.
Right, and I know that he did address it when he visited the National Museum of African American History in his prepared remarks there. And LZ has been, discussing the Russia issue. Well, look, the FBI is investigating. The Senate Intelligence Committee is investigating on a bipartisan basis. And I think every American wants to get to the bottom of Russian meddling in an American election. I think these are very legitimate concerns. But in terms of the president tonight, moving forward, we've heard from Sean Spicer, his press secretary, that as we've discussed, he intends to look back, his sort of greatest hits, his highlight reel, and then moving forward. It's the moving forward that, of course, we don't know precisely what he's going to say. And for conservative Republicans, for budget hawks, for folks who wanted to see Obamacare repealed, this is going to be, I think, a very interesting speech.
LZ, in your opinion, what would be a success for Donald Trump tonight?
To find a way to get Democrats to applaud for him. It'd be very easy to get your base to applaud by giving them the red meat. But in order to get those Democrats who are there, who are skeptical, who are upset, who represent congressional districts that are marching and protesting regularly, what are some of the things that he can say to get them to at least support him publicly for tonight? Are you going to talk about the infrastructure bill? Maybe there's some things in the tax reform. Maybe you can talk about immigration in a way that sounds more compassionate. If he's able to hit any of these things that sounds positive to the Democrats in that room, I think that would be a success. But if he only plays to his base, he's going to have somewhat of a muted response, and it's just going to be business as usual, regardless of how much talk of unity he may give.
And LZ, I would add to that, let's remember that there are 10 Democratic senators up for election in 2018 in states that Trump won. I will be curious to see in the speech, to hear in the speech, if he has a little bit for them to go back to their constituents, to work across the aisle. For example, if he addresses energy, coal, that's something obviously that Senator Joe Manchin of West Virginia might applaud. You talked about infrastructure. So we were talking earlier with Alex Castellanos. Will tonight's speech be a little bit of Donald Trump playing on the other team or playing with the other side? We'll find out.
I'm curious to get both of your take on this point that Alex made about how, look, President Trump is not an ideologue, right?
No.
He has some very liberal social views.
He has strong ideas, but you can't
ideas.
Necessarily pigeonhole them.
Right. So this could be, if we're going to carry forward this theme of optimism, which the administration wants to carry through tonight. I go by what I see, and so when I see it, I will believe it. But I'm curious what you guys think about that opportunity that exists for this administration. In terms of especially who is forming the policy and the messaging coming out of the administration. Will they grab onto that as an opportunity?
Well, I don't know that we'll hear it tonight in his address to the joint session here. But President Trump, he campaigned that he would not touch Social Security or Medicare, for example. That, of course, is something that riles up budget hawks on the right and conservatives. But, Democrats, frankly, should be very pleased with that.
LZ, what do you think?
I remember being in Cleveland when Donald Trump became the first nominee to mention the LGBT community on that stage, and how everyone thought they were so hopeful. And then what do we find out within the last 6 days? The administration is basically attacking the LGBT youth. And so, I'm optimistic that what he says will be positive in terms of what, liberals or Democrats may want to hear. But ultimately, it's about what he does. What sort of policies does he enact? What sort of policies does he pursue? And if the example that I gave in dealing with the LGBT community sets the tone, that should tell us that he's willing to say things that may sound liberal, but once he gets in with his party, it's going to be much more on the conservative side, which would be disappointing, I believe, for some Democrats.
And we're seeing now members of the Supreme Court coming into the House chamber to take their seats as well.
I don't see Justice Thomas. Is he the one who might have stayed home tonight? There's usually one.
Justice Ginsburg as well.
Justice Ginsburg? Yeah.
Hey, Rick down in D.C., I'm curious to get your take on this, though. There is an undeniable opportunity here for President Trump to reach across the aisle, as Amy pointed out, to give some of those Democrats something to take home. Do you think he'll do it?
You look at the speech excerpts that they put out so far, and my first thought is somebody hacked Donald Trump. Where did these words come from? The time for small thinking is over. The time for trivial fights is behind us. It's not just the speech, though, guys. As you know, you can't undo what he's done over the last 2 years as a political candidate, the divisions that he has helped sow and exploited to great electoral effect, to great political power, and just heal it all with a speech. No one is going to buy that. That said, there are opportunities because he is not ideological. He does not come in with any real preconceived policy notions. He doesn't come in beholden to a whole raft of special interests. He is making Republicans, conservatives squirm often just as much as he is Democrats. There is a power in that. There's an opportunity in that, if you grasp it, to take advantage of this extraordinary moment and provide a type of new leadership. He is not. This speech may be the exception, maybe it's the start of something new. He hasn't shown that yet, as LZ said, in the actions that we've seen. They have not been actions on the executive front that say, I want to heal, I want to bring people together. If you start to do that with legislation, he will find some willing dance parties on the Democratic side, despite the pressures to resist Trump. But let me tell you guys, it cannot just be a speech, because words are not alone going to fool any Democrats into saying, well, maybe Trump's a good guy, maybe we should work with him.
Rick, this is Amy. Another question. At CPAC, we heard Steve Bannon explain this very sort of fascinating philosophy that he's had 3 buckets: national security, sovereignty, economic nationalism, and the administrative state. Will Donald Trump be hitting on these 3 themes tonight? And will he, do you think, be explaining in more detail what he means by economic nationalism, which, certainly isn't conservative, but it's an idea?
It is an idea, and I think you see it in strains of what he wants to do around trade and around tax policy in particular. And his whole idea of Make America Great Again has echoes of that. I don't think you're going to hear him put the intellectual foundations together the same way that Steve Bannon did. Bannon is kind of writing the very broad strokes here. This is going to be some policy pieces of it, and it's also just not Trump's words to think in those terms. But it is an opportunity to outline what worked for him. And I think the way that Bannon described it, a lot of voters who supported Donald Trump would agree with that. And whether they would enunciate the buckets, I don't know that Trump himself would enunciate them. But that is the vision that's animating him. And I thought Bannon's speech was fascinating because you hear so many echoes of that in things that Donald Trump says.
Rick, let's say this speech goes perfectly. It achieves everything that the Trump administration wants it to. What happens tomorrow?
Unity in the Republican Party, first and foremost. And I take LZ's point about needing to work with Democrats. Right now, they want a united Republican Party to start working on deliverables. If they can repeal Obamacare and replace it with something the Republicans get along, that's a huge victory that is a motivating and energizing force behind it. Wins beget more wins. I think that's the biggest thing, if you can get the party together and start to settle on a strategy. Now, if he stays vague in a whole bunch of subject areas, you're going to hear disappointment on the Hill. And we're at almost a breaking point in the last 24, 48 hours in terms of the Hill relationship with the Trump White House. It just isn't there. And they need to hear a lot more. So I think his opportunity here is to try to bring this coalition back together. He's lost a lot of that momentum in the last 5 or 6 weeks.
We're seeing members of the cabinet. Oh, sorry, Elsie, go ahead.
No, I was going to ask Rick, what is the over-under on him mentioning either Hillary Clinton or President Obama?
That's a great question. Not in the excerpts that we've seen so far. He has surprised people with what he decides to mention and what he doesn't decide to mention. I think it's been intriguing just in the last 12 to 24 hours, the way he's talking about President Obama now in a more negative light, and saying, I think he's behind those protests, and I think his people are behind some of these intelligence community leaks. He's been trying to cozy up to him and the idea of him. So I don't know that you're going to hear a lot of praise for Obama, because frankly it doesn't fit with the narrative, which is that things are in a pretty bad place right now. One thing about optimism, Trump style, guys, I think is worth remembering. When he has been optimistic in the past, the optimism is surrounding him. He's optimistic that he can change things. It's not that the country is in a great place. It's that he's going to change it, and he's going to get people in the right direction.
Rick, really quickly, we've heard President Trump refer to, we got to go. I'm sorry, I got to leave it right there.
Hey, Rick Klein down in D.C., stay with us. All of you folks following along at home, stay right here. We're going to bring you the president's first address to a joint session of Congress very shortly. We've seen all the congressional leadership, members of his cabinet, Supreme Court justices filing in, and we're going to go live now to Washington, D.C.
This is an ABC.
Yeah, I'll get it done. Some water, do you want some? Hey, Betsy. Steve.
Yeah, they said just don't block that. They don't muffle the sound. Sorry, they're trying to pick up.
Hey, guys. Hey, Nikki.
Being memorialized on the record.
Hi, Tom. Hey, look, the lady even got a haircut. Wow. You can tell he's taking this job seriously now. Like, he got a haircut. I never. Here's all these colors. Look at lady. Yeah.
I like it. A lot of people don't.
Mr. Speaker, the President of the United States.
Thank you very much.
Members of Congress, I have the high privilege and the distinct honor of presenting to you the President of the United States.
Thank you very much. Mr. Speaker, Mr. Vice President, members of Congress, the First Lady of the United States. And citizens of America, tonight, as we mark the conclusion of our celebration of Black History Month, we are reminded of our nation's path toward civil rights and the work that still remains to be done. Recent threats targeting Jewish community centers and vandalism of Jewish cemeteries, as well as last week's shooting in Kansas City, remind us that while we may be a nation divided on policies, we are a country that stands united in condemning hate and evil in all of its very ugly forms. Each American generation passes the torch of truth, liberty, and justice in an unbroken chain all the way down to the present. That torch is now in our hands, and we will use it to light up the world. I am here tonight to deliver a message of unity and strength, and it is a message deeply delivered from my heart. A new chapter of American greatness is now beginning. A new national pride is sweeping across our nation, and a new surge of optimism is placing impossible dreams firmly within our grasp. What we are witnessing today is the renewal of the American spirit. Our allies will find that America is once again ready to lead. All the nations of the world, friend or foe, will find that America is strong, America is proud, and America is free. In 9 years, the United States will celebrate the 250th anniversary of our founding, 250 years since the day we declared our independence. It will be one of the great milestones in the history of the world. But what will America look like as we reach our 250th year? What kind of country will we leave for our children? I will not allow the mistakes of recent decades past to define the course of our future. For too long, we've watched our middle class shrink as we've exported our jobs and wealth to foreign countries. We've financed and built one global project after another, but ignored the fates of our children in the inner cities of Chicago, Baltimore, Detroit, and so many other places throughout our land. We've defended the borders of other nations while leaving our own borders wide open for anyone to cross and for drugs to pour in at a now unprecedented rate. And we've spent trillions and trillions of dollars overseas while our infrastructure at home has so badly crumbled. Then in 2016, the earth shifted beneath our feet. The rebellion started as a quiet protest, spoken by families of all colors and creeds, families who just wanted a fair shot for their children and a fair hearing for their concerns. But then the quiet voices became a loud chorus as thousands of citizens now spoke out together from cities small and large all across our country. Finally, the chorus became an earthquake, and the people turned out by the tens of millions, and they were all united by one very simple but crucial demand: that America must put its own citizens first, because only then can we truly make America great again. Dying industries will come roaring back to life. Heroic veterans will get the care they so desperately need. Our military will be given the resources its brave warriors so richly deserve. Crumbling infrastructure will be replaced with new roads, bridges, tunnels, airports, and railways gleaming across our very, very beautiful land. Our terrible drug epidemic will slow down and ultimately stop. And our neglected inner cities will see a rebirth of hope, safety, and opportunity. Above all else, we will keep our promises to the American people. Thank you. It's been a little over a month since my inauguration, and I want to take this moment to update the nation on the progress I've made in keeping those promises. Since my election, Ford, Fiat Chrysler, General Motors, Sprint, SoftBank, Lockheed, Intel, Walmart, and many others have announced that they will invest billions and billions of dollars in the United States and will create tens of thousands of new American jobs. The stock market has gained almost $3 trillion in value since the election on November 8th, a record. We've saved taxpayers hundreds of millions of dollars by bringing down the price of fantastic, and it is a fantastic, new F-35 jet fighter, and we'll be saving billions more on contracts all across our government. We have placed a hiring freeze on non-military and non-essential federal workers. We have begun to drain the swamp of government corruption by imposing a 5-year ban on lobbying by executive branch officials and a lifetime ban. Thank you. Thank you. And a lifetime ban on becoming lobbyists for a foreign government. We have undertaken a historic effort to massively reduce job-crushing regulations, creating a deregulation task force inside of every government agency. And we're imposing a new rule which mandates that for every one new regulation, 2 old regulations must be eliminated. We're going to stop the regulations that threaten the future and livelihood of our great coal miners. We have cleared the way for the construction of the Keystone and Dakota Access pipelines. Thereby creating tens of thousands of jobs. And I've issued a new directive that new American pipelines be made with American steel. We have withdrawn the United States from the job-killing Trans-Pacific Partnership. And with the help of Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, we have formed a council with our neighbors in Canada to help ensure that women entrepreneurs have access to the networks, markets, and capital they need to start a business and live out their financial dreams. To protect our citizens, I have directed the Department of Justice to form a task force on reducing violent crime. I have further ordered the Departments of Homeland Security and Justice, along with the Department of State and the Director of National Intelligence, to coordinate an aggressive strategy to dismantle the criminal cartels that have spread all across our nation. We will stop the drugs from pouring into our country and poisoning our youth, and we will expand treatment for those who have become so badly addicted. At the same time, my administration has answered the pleas of the American people for immigration enforcement and border security. By finally enforcing our immigration laws, we will raise wages, help the unemployed, save billions and billions of dollars, and make our communities safer for everyone. We want all Americans to succeed, but that can't happen in an environment of lawless chaos. We must restore integrity and the rule of law at our borders. For that reason, we will soon begin the construction of a great, great wall along our southern border. As we speak tonight, we are removing gang members, drug dealers, and criminals that threaten our communities and prey on our very innocent citizens. Bad ones are going out as I speak, and as I've promised throughout the campaign. To any in Congress who do not believe we should enforce our laws, I would ask you this one question. What would you say to the American family that loses their jobs, their income, or their loved one because America refused to uphold its laws and defend its borders? Our obligation is to serve, protect, and defend the citizens of the United States. We are also taking strong measures to protect our nation from radical Islamic terrorism. According to data provided by the Department of Justice, the vast majority of individuals convicted of terrorism and terrorism-related offenses since 9/11 came here from outside of our country. We have seen the attacks at home, from Boston to San Bernardino to the Pentagon, and yes, even the World Trade Center. We have seen the attacks in France, in Belgium, in Germany, and all over the world. It is not compassionate, but reckless to allow uncontrolled entry from places where proper vetting cannot occur. Those given the high honor of admission to the United States should support this country and love its people and its values. We cannot allow a beachhead of terrorism to form inside America. We cannot allow our nation to become a sanctuary for extremists. That is why my administration has been working on improved vetting procedures, and we will shortly take new steps to keep our nation safe and to keep those out who will do us harm. As promised, I directed the Department of Defense to develop a plan to demolish and destroy ISIS, a network of lawless savages that have slaughtered Muslims and Christians and men and women and children of all faiths and all beliefs. We will work with our allies, including our friends and allies in the Muslim world, to extinguish this vile enemy from our planet. I have also imposed new sanctions on entities and individuals who support Iran's ballistic missile program and reaffirmed our unbreakable alliance with the State of Israel. Finally, I have kept my promise to appoint a justice to the United States Supreme Court from my list of 20 judges who will defend our Constitution. I am greatly honored to have Maureen Scalia with us in the gallery tonight. Thank you, Maureen. Her late great husband, Antonin Scalia, will forever be a symbol of American justice. To fill his seat, we have chosen Judge Neal Gorsuch, a man of incredible skill and deep devotion to the law. He was confirmed unanimously by the Court of Appeals, and I am asking the Senate to swiftly approve his nomination. Tonight, as I outline the next steps we must take as a country, we must honestly acknowledge the circumstances we inherited. 94 million Americans are out of the labor force. Over 43 million people are now living in poverty, and over 43 million Americans are on food stamps. More than 1 in 5 people in their prime working years are not working. We have the worst financial recovery in 65 years. In the last 8 years, the past administration has put on more new debt than nearly all of the other presidents combined. We've lost more than 1/4 of our manufacturing jobs since NAFTA was approved, and we've lost 60,000 factories since China joined the World Trade Organization in 2001. Our trade deficit in goods with the world last year was nearly $800 billion. And overseas, we have inherited a series of tragic foreign policy disasters. Solving these and so many other pressing problems will require us to work past the differences of party. It will require us to tap into the American spirit that has overcome every challenge throughout our long and storied history. But to accomplish our goals at home and abroad, we must restart the engine of the American economy, making it easier for companies to do business in the United States and much, much harder for companies to leave our country. Right now, American companies are taxed at one of the highest rates anywhere in the world. My economic team is developing historic tax reform that will reduce the tax rate on our companies so they can compete and thrive anywhere and with anyone. It will be a big, big cut. At the same time, we will provide massive tax relief for the middle class. We must create a level playing field for American companies, and our workers have to do it. Currently, when we ship products out of America, many other countries make us pay very high tariffs and taxes. But when foreign companies ship their products into America, we charge them nothing or almost nothing. I just met with officials and workers from a great American company, Harley-Davidson. In fact, they proudly displayed 5 of their magnificent motorcycles made in the USA on the front lawn of the White House. And they wanted me to ride one, and I said, no, thank you. At our meeting, I asked them, how are you doing? How is business? They said that it's good. I asked them further, how are you doing with other countries, mainly international sales? They told me without even complaining, because they have been so mistreated for so long that they've become used to it, that it's very hard to do business with other countries because they tax our goods at such a high rate. They said that in the case of another country, they tax their motorcycles at 100%. They weren't even asking for a change, but I am. I believe. I believe strongly in free trade, but it also has to be fair trade. It's been a long time since we had fair trade. The first Republican president, Abraham Lincoln, warned that the abandonment of the protective policy by the American government will produce want and ruin among our people. Lincoln was right, and it's time we heeded his advice and his words. I am not going to let America and its great companies and workers be taken advantage of us any longer. They have taken advantage of our country. No longer. I'm going to bring back millions of jobs. Protecting our workers also means reforming our system of legal immigration. The current outdated system depresses wages for our poorest workers and puts great pressure on taxpayers. Nations around the world, like Canada, Australia, and many others, have a merit-based immigration system. It's a basic principle that those seeking to enter a country ought to be able to support themselves financially. Yet in America, we do not enforce this rule, straining the very public resources that our poorest citizens rely upon. According to the National Academy of Sciences, our current immigration system costs American taxpayers many billions of dollars a year. Switching away from this current system of lower-skilled immigration and instead adopting a merit-based system, we will have so many more benefits. It will save countless dollars, raise workers' wages, and help struggling families, including immigrant families, enter the middle class. And they will do it quickly, and they will be very, very happy indeed. I believe that real and positive immigration reform is possible as long as we focus on the following goals: to improve jobs and wages for Americans, to strengthen our nation's security, and to restore respect for our laws. If we are guided by the well-being of American citizens, then I believe Republicans and Democrats can work together to achieve an outcome that has eluded our country for decades. Another Republican president, Dwight D. Eisenhower, initiated the last truly great national infrastructure program, the building of the interstate highway system. The time has come for a new program of national rebuilding. America has spent approximately $6 trillion in the Middle East. All the while, our infrastructure at home is crumbling. With the $6 trillion, we could have rebuilt our country twice, and maybe even 3 times if we had people who had the ability to negotiate. To launch our national rebuilding, I will be asking Congress to approve legislation that produces a $1 trillion investment in infrastructure of the United States, financed through both public and private capital, creating millions of new jobs. This effort will be guided by two core principles: Buy American and Hire American. Tonight, I am also calling on this Congress to repeal and replace Obamacare. With reforms that expand choice, increase access, lower costs, and at the same time provide better health care. Mandating every American to buy government-approved health insurance was never the right solution for our country. The way to make health insurance available to everyone is to lower the cost of health insurance, and that is what we are going to do. Obamacare premiums nationwide have increased by double and triple digits. As an example, Arizona went up 116% last year alone. Governor Matt Bevin of Kentucky just said Obamacare is failing in his state, the state of Kentucky, and it's unsustainable and collapsing. 1/3 of the counties have only one insurer, and they're losing them fast. They are losing them so fast. They're leaving. And many Americans have no choice at all. There's no choice left. Remember, when you were told that you could keep your doctor and keep your plan, we now know that all of those promises have been totally broken. Obamacare is collapsing, and we must act decisively to protect all Americans. Action is not a choice, it is a necessity. So I am calling on all Democrats and Republicans in Congress to work with us to save Americans from this imploding Obamacare disaster. Here are the principles that should guide Congress as we move to create a better health care system for all Americans. First, we should ensure that Americans with pre-existing conditions have access to coverage and that we have a stable transition for Americans currently enrolled in the health care exchanges. Secondly, we should help Americans purchase their own coverage through the use of tax credits and expanded health savings accounts. But it must be the plan they want, not the plan forced on them by our government. Thirdly, we should give our state governors the resources and flexibility they need with Medicaid to make sure no one is left out. Fourth, we should implement legal reforms that protect patients and doctors from unnecessary costs that drive up the price of insurance and work to bring down the artificially high price of drugs and bring them down immediately. And finally, the time has come to give Americans the freedom to purchase health insurance across state lines. Which will create a truly competitive national marketplace that will bring costs way down and provide far better care. So important. Everything that is broken in our country can be fixed. Every problem can be solved. And every hurting family can find healing and hope. Our citizens deserve this, and so much more. So why not join forces and finally get the job done and get it done right? On this and so many other things, Democrats and Republicans should get together and unite for the good of our country and for the good of the American people. My administration wants to work with members of both parties to make child care accessible and affordable, to help ensure new parents that they have paid family leave. To invest in women's health and to promote clean air and clean water and to rebuild our military and our infrastructure. True love for our people requires us to find common ground, to advance the common good, and to cooperate on behalf of every American child who deserves a much brighter future. An incredible young woman is with us this evening who should serve as an inspiration to us all. Today is Rare Disease Day, and joining us in the gallery is a rare disease survivor, Megan Crowley. Megan Megan was diagnosed with Pompe disease, a rare and serious illness, when she was 15 months old. She was not expected to live past 5. On receiving this news, Megan's dad, John, fought with everything he had to save the life of his precious child. He founded a company to look for a cure and helped develop the drug that saved Megan's life. Today, she is 20 years old and a sophomore at Notre Dame. Megan's story is about the unbounded power of a father's love for a daughter. But our slow and burdensome approval process at the Food and Drug Administration keeps too many advances, like the one that saved Megan's life, from reaching those in need. If we slash the restraints, not just at the FDA, but across our government, then we will be blessed with far more miracles just like Megan. In fact, our children will grow up in a nation of miracles. But to achieve this future, we must enrich the mind and the souls of every American child. Education is the civil rights issue of our time. I am calling upon members of both parties to pass an education bill that funds school choice for disadvantaged youth, including millions of African American and Latino children. These families should be free to choose the public, private, charter, magnet, religious, or home school that is right for them. Joining us tonight in the gallery is a remarkable woman, Denisha Merryweather. As a young girl, Denisha struggled in school and failed third grade twice. But then she was able to enroll in a private center for learning, great learning center, with the help of a tax credit and a scholarship program. Today, she is the first in her family to graduate not just from high school, but from college. Later this year, she will get her master's degree in social work. We want all children to be able to break the cycle of poverty, just like Denisha. But to break the cycle of poverty, we must also break the cycle of violence. The murder rate in 2015 experienced its largest single-year increase in nearly half a century. In Chicago, more than 4,000 people were shot last year alone, and the murder rate so far this year has been even higher. This is not acceptable in our society. Every American child should be able to grow up in a safe community, to attend a great school, and to have access to a high-paying job. But to create this future, we must work with, not against, the men and women of law enforcement. We must build bridges of cooperation and trust, not drive the wedge of disunity and really it's what it is, division. It's pure, unadulterated division. We have to unify. Police and sheriffs are members of our community. They're friends and neighbors. They're mothers and fathers, sons and daughters, and they leave behind loved ones every day who worry about whether or not they'll come home safe and sound. We must support the incredible men and women of law enforcement. And we must support the victims of crime. I have ordered the Department of Homeland Security to create an office to serve American victims. The office is called VOICE, Victims of Immigration Crime Engagement. We are providing a voice to those who have been ignored by our media and silenced by special interests. Joining us in the audience tonight are four very brave Americans whose government failed them. Their names are Jamil Shaw, Susan Oliver, Jenna Oliver, and Jessica Davis. Jamil's 17-year-old son was viciously murdered by an illegal immigrant gang member who had just been released from prison. Jamil Shore Jr. was an incredible young man with unlimited potential who was getting ready to go to college, where he would have excelled as a great college quarterback. But he never got the chance. His father, who is in the audience tonight, has become a very good friend of mine. Jamil, thank you. Thank you. Also with us are Susan Oliver and Jessica Davis. Their husbands, Deputy Sheriff Danny Oliver and Detective Michael Davis, were slain in the line of duty in California. They were pillars of their community. These brave men were viciously gunned down by an illegal immigrant with a criminal record and 2 prior deportations, should have never been in our country. Sitting with Susan is her daughter, Jenna. Jenna, I want you to know that your father was a hero and that tonight you have the love of an entire country supporting you and praying for you. To Jamil, Jenna, Susan, and Jessica, I want you to know that we will never stop fighting for justice. Your loved ones will never, ever be forgotten. We will always honor their memory. Finally, to keep America safe, we must provide the men and women of the United States military with the tools they need to prevent war. If they must, they have to fight, and they only have to win. I am sending Congress a budget that rebuilds the military, eliminates the defense sequester, and calls for one of the largest increases in national defense spending in American history. My budget will also increase funding for our veterans. Our veterans have delivered for this nation, and now we must deliver for them. The challenges we face as a nation are great, but our people are even greater, and none are greater or braver than those who fight for America in uniform. We are blessed to be joined tonight by Corinne Owens, the widow of U.S. Navy Special Operator, Senior Chief William Ryan Owens. Ryan died as he lived, a warrior and a hero, battling against terrorism and securing our nation. I just spoke to our great General Mattis just now, who reconfirmed that, and I quote, Ryan was a part of a highly successful raid that generated large amounts of vital intelligence that will lead to many more victories in the future against our enemy. Ryan's legacy is etched into eternity. Thank you. And Ryan is looking down right now, you know that, and he's very happy because I think he just broke a record. For as the Bible teaches us, there is no greater act of love than to lay down one's life for one's friends. Ryan laid down his life for his friends, for his country, and for our freedom. And we will never forget Ryan. To those allies who wonder what kind of a friend America will be, look no further than the heroes who wear our uniform. Our foreign policy calls for a direct, robust, and meaningful engagement with the world. It is American leadership based on vital security interests that we share with our allies all across the globe. We strongly support NATO, an alliance forged through the bonds of 2 world wars that dethroned fascism and the Cold War and defeated communism. But our partners must meet their financial obligations. And now, based on our very strong and frank discussions, they are beginning to do just that. In fact, I can tell you the money is pouring in. Very nice. Very nice. We expect our partners, whether in NATO, the Middle East, or in the Pacific, to take a direct and meaningful role in both strategic and military operations and pay their fair share of the cost, have to do that. We will respect historic institutions, but we will respect the foreign rights of all nations, and they have to respect our rights as a nation also. Free nations are the best vehicle for expressing the will of the people and America respects the right of all nations to chart their own path. My job is not to represent the world. My job is to represent the United States of America. But we know that America is better off when there is less conflict, not more. We must learn from the mistakes of the past. We have seen the war and the destruction that have ravaged and raged throughout the world, all across the world. The only long-term solution for these humanitarian disasters, in many cases, is to create the conditions where displaced persons can safely return home and begin the long, long process of rebuilding. America is willing to find new friends and to forge new partnerships where shared interests align. We want harmony and stability, not war and conflict. We want peace wherever peace can be found. America is friends today with former enemies. Some of our closest allies decades ago fought on the opposite side of these terrible, terrible wars. This history should give us all faith in the possibilities for a better world. Hopefully, the 250th year for America will see a world that is more peaceful, more just, and more free. On our 100th anniversary in 1876, citizens from across our nation came to Philadelphia to celebrate America's centennial. At that celebration, the country's builders and artists and inventors showed off their wonderful creations. Alexander Graham Bell displayed his telephone for the first time. Remington unveiled the first typewriter. An early attempt was made at electric light. Thomas Edison showed an automatic telegraph and an electric pen. Imagine the wonders our country could know in America's 250th year. Think of the marvels we can achieve if we simply set free the dreams of our people. Cures to the illnesses that have always plagued us are not too much to hope. American footprints on distant worlds are not too big a dream. Millions lifted from welfare to work is not too much to expect. And streets where mothers are safe from fear, schools where children learn in peace, and jobs where Americans prosper and grow are not too much to ask. When we have all of this, we will have made America greater than ever before. For all Americans, this is our vision. This is our mission. But we can only get there together. We are one people with one destiny. We all bleed the same blood. We all salute the same great American flag. And we all are made by the same God. When we fulfill this vision, when we celebrate our 250 years of glorious freedom, we will look back on tonight as when this new chapter of American greatness began. The time for small thinking is over. The time for trivial fights is behind us. We just need the courage to share the dreams that fill our hearts, the bravery to express the hopes that stir our souls, and the confidence to turn those hopes and those dreams into action. From now on, America will be empowered by our aspirations, not burdened by our fears. Inspired by the future, not bound by failures of the past. And guided by a vision, not blinded by our doubts. I am asking all citizens to embrace this renewal of the American spirit. I am asking all members of Congress to join me in dreaming big and bold and daring things for our country. I am asking everyone watching tonight to seize this moment, believe in yourselves, believe in your future, and believe once more in America. Thank you, God bless you, and God bless the United States.
home run. We talked several times in this council. We did.
Got a check.
Thanks. Mr. President, great job.
Harley Davidson.
Appreciate it. Most inspiring speech in 30 years. Wow. Most inspiring in 30 years. I like that.
I thought it was Reagan-esque.
Thank you every second. Thank you very much. I appreciate it. There he is. My original support blew himself. It used to be lonely out there.
Never given.
It used to be lonely. Here's the other one. Good job, Mr. President. Thank you, man. Beautiful. So proud.
This is my great speech. That was a great speech. One of the best that we've seen in quite some time.
Yeah. Thank you very much.
How did you do in golf against the Japanese Prime Minister? It seems like you got.
He was terrific. He's a quality man.
Great speech. It all started with Kim. It
all started. You're right.
You know what? You're right. Great speech.
Good LCC last week. Really appreciate the folks. We had a great time. It's going to be. I think it's going to be warm. Go get it.
Killed it.
Appreciate it.
Good job,
Mr. President. Thank you so much.
New York. This is from your friend Noah.
I've heard many speeches. That's the best.
Thank you, Mr. President.
What's that?
I've heard many speeches.
That was phenomenal.
Mr. President.
30,000.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you for the vision. Very gorgeous. Good job. I will.
Watch yourself.
Thank you very much.
The House will come to order. Members, please take your conversations off the floor. The House will come to order. For what purposes the gentleman from California seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, I move that the message of the President be referred to the Committee of the Whole House of the State of the Union and ordered printed.
Without objection. Does the gentleman from California have a motion?
Mr. Speaker, I move that the House be now adjourned.
The question is on the motion to adjourn. Those in favor say aye. Those opposed say no. The ayes have it. The motion is agreed to. Accordingly, the House stands adjourned until 10 a.m. tomorrow for morning hour debates.
imagine any of them, though, being successful, as tempting as it may be, because these were just rhetorical flourishes. This was, as Matthew Dowd said, a disciplined speech, a workmanlike speech, probably the most presidential thing he has done in the traditional sense in his 6 weeks in office. But this was not a policy pivot of any meaningful sort. These were the policies he talked about during the campaign. He's marketing them differently. He's packaging them differently. But they are what they have always been, which is to say a rather severe agenda for the American people.
Rick, when we spoke before the address, I asked you if this speech goes perfectly, what happens tomorrow? Now that the speech is over, two questions. One, how did it go for Donald Trump and his White House? And two, what can we expect tomorrow in the form of substance?
This was about as good a delivery as you'll see Donald Trump ever have in a presidential address. And I think sticking to the teleprompter, sticking to the message, critical for that. Republicans were ebullient, jumping out of their seats over and over again. But I think if he had crafted the absolutely perfect speech, you would have found an opportunity for Democrats to get on board. I don't see that happening. I await those responses. I await what they say about this new tone, but it's not really policy changes.
We're going to wait to see what the Democrats have to say, of course. We've got the Democratic response coming up as well. Former Kentucky Governor Steve Beshear will be delivering that response very, very shortly. All in all, though, mixed reviews for Mr. Trump. As you mentioned, we're going to have to see how things play out over the next couple of days.
And you know what,
yeah.
Anna? I called it on Joe Manchin. Cole, he stood up.
You want those points.
There
yeah,
you go.
Tag those points for
Well
everyone
done.
playing along.
I'm Steve Beshear. I was governor of Kentucky from 2007 to 2015. Now I'm a private citizen. I'm here in Lexington, Kentucky, some 400 miles from Washington, at a diner with some neighbors, Democrats and Republicans, where we just watched the president's address. I'm a proud Democrat, but first and foremost, I'm a proud Republican and Democrat and mostly American. And like many of you, I am worried about the future of this nation. Look, I grew up in Kentucky in a small town called Dawson Springs. My dad and granddad were Baptist preachers. My family owned a funeral home. And my wife, Jane, and I have been married for almost 50 years. I became governor at the start of the global recession. And after 8 years, we left things a lot better than we found them. By being fiscally responsible, I even cut my own pay, we balanced our budget and turned deficits into surpluses without raising taxes. We cut our unemployment rate in half. We made huge gains in high school graduation rates, and we found health coverage for over 500,000 Kentuckians. We did that through trust and mutual respect. I listened. And I built partnerships with business leaders and with Republicans in our legislature. We put people first and politics second. The America I love allowed a small-town preacher's kid to be elected governor. And it taught me to embrace people who are different from me, not vilify them. The America I love has always been about looking forward, not backward, about working together to find solutions regardless of party, instead of allowing our differences to divide us and hold us back. And we Democrats are committed to creating the opportunity for every American to succeed by growing our economy with good-paying jobs, educating and training our people to fill those jobs, giving our businesses the freedom to innovate, keeping our country safe, and providing health care that families can afford and rely on. Mr. President, as a candidate, you promised to be a champion for families struggling to make ends meet. And I hope you live up to that promise. But one of your very first executive orders makes it harder for those families to even afford a mortgage. Then you started rolling back rules that provide oversight of the financial industry and safeguard us against another national economic meltdown. And you picked a cabinet of billionaires and Wall Street insiders who want to eviscerate the protections that most Americans count on and that help level the playing field. That's not being our champion. That's being Wall Street's champion. And even more troubling, you and your Republican allies in Congress seem determined to rip affordable health insurance away from millions of Americans who most need it. Does the Affordable Care Act need some repairs? Sure it does. But so far, every Republican idea to replace the Affordable Care Act would reduce the number of Americans covered, despite your promises to the contrary. Mr. President, folks here in Kentucky expect you to keep your word, because this isn't a game. It's life and death for people. These ideas promise access to care, but deny the importance of making care affordable and effective. They would charge families more for fewer benefits and put the insurance companies back in control. Behind these ideas is the belief that folks at the lower end of the economic ladder just don't deserve health care, that it's somehow their fault that their employer doesn't offer insurance, or that they can't afford to buy expensive health plans. But just who are these 22 million Americans, including 500,000 people right here in Kentucky, who now have health care that didn't have it before? Look, they're not aliens from some distant planet. They're our friends and our neighbors. We sit in the bleachers with them on Friday night. We worship in the pews with them on Sunday morning. They're farmers, restaurant workers, part-time teachers, nurses' aides, construction workers, and entrepreneurs working at high-tech startups. And before the Affordable Care Act, they woke up every morning and went to work, just hoping and praying they wouldn't get sick, because they knew that they were just one bad diagnosis away from bankruptcy. You know, in 2010, this country made a commitment that every American deserved health care they could afford and rely on. And we Democrats are going to do everything in our power to keep President Trump and the Republican Congress from reneging on that commitment. But we're going to need your help by speaking out. Another commitment now being tested is to our national security. Look, make no mistake, I'm a military veteran myself, and I know that protecting America is a president's highest duty. Yet President Trump is ignoring serious threats to our national security from Russia, who's not our friend, while alienating our allies who fought with us side by side and are our friends in a dangerous world. His approach makes us less safe and should worry every freedom-loving American. Instead, President Trump has all but declared war on refugees and immigrants. Look, the president can and should enforce our immigration laws, but we can protect America without abandoning our principles and our moral obligation to help those fleeing war and terror, without tearing families apart, and without needlessly jeopardizing our military men and women fighting overseas. You know, another Republican president, Ronald Reagan, once said, "In America, our origins matter less than our destination." And that is what democracy is all about. President Trump also needs to understand that people may disagree with him from time to time, but that doesn't make them his enemies. When the president attacks the loyalty and credibility of our intelligence agencies, the court system, the military, the free press, individual Americans, simply because he doesn't like what they say, he's eroding our democracy, and that's reckless. Real leaders don't spread derision and division. Real leaders strengthen. They unify, they partner, and they offer real solutions instead of ultimatums and blame. Look, I may be old-fashioned, but I still believe that dignity, compassion, honesty, and accountability are basic American values. And as a Democrat, I believe that if you work hard, you deserve the opportunity to realize the American dream. regardless of whether you're a coal miner in Kentucky, a teacher in Rhode Island, an auto worker in Detroit, or a software engineer in San Antonio. Our political system is broken. It's broken because too many of our leaders think it's all about them. They need to remember that they work for us, and helping us is their work. Kentucky made real progress while I was governor because we were motivated by one thing: helping families. Democrats are trying to bring that same focus back to Washington, D.C. Americans are a diverse people, and we may disagree on a lot of things, but we've always come together when we remember that we are one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you.